If you followed Boulder's recent budget conversations, or even just caught pieces of them, you may have felt confused, frustrated, or even distrustful. Those reactions are completely understandable without the historical background that puts today's conversations in context. So, for a moment, time travel back with me a couple of decades to the late aughts, when groups of community leaders, economists, and city staff formed as Blue Ribbon Commissions. These commissions looked decades ahead to understand the economic pressures we'd be facing right now. Their projections ended up aligning so closely with what we're experiencing today that it almost feels like they had a crystal ball. With community support, prior city councils implemented many of the BRC's suggestions. Others depended on that earlier work, and we're finally in a position where we can take them on. My hope is that understanding how we got here will help us take the next steps together. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to walk through what the BRC's found, what the city has done since then, and what's still ahead. I think you'll find it genuinely interesting, and I hope you'll tune in. Now that we've set the stage, let's talk about the 2008 Blue Ribbon Commission report's first core finding, a long-term mismatch between the growth of our costs and revenues. The BRC projected city revenues would rise about 3% a year, while the cost of running the city would rise closer to 4%. That 1% difference doesn't sound like a big deal in a single year, but over time it adds up. They also pointed out that many of Boulder's everyday services relied on temporary taxes. This meant the city had to keep going back to voters to maintain services. Since then, Boulder has renewed many of those temporary taxes, which avoided the biggest gap. Even with the progress we've made, the underlying math hasn't changed. City costs grow faster than city revenues. That's the backdrop for every budget conversation we have today. And because Western states like Colorado have historically kept property taxes low, we rely more on sales tax to fund basic services. That adds to the challenge of eliminating our long-term gap. Next time, we'll look at how the BRC anticipated economic changes that reshape the sales tax base Boulder depends on. Last time, we talked about the long-term mismatch between the city's revenues and costs. The BRC also warned that Boulder's reliance on sales tax would become harder to sustain over time, and that prediction has largely come true. These days, a smaller share of household spending goes toward taxable goods, and a larger share goes towards services like travel, fitness, and streaming. Most services aren't taxed in Colorado, so while the economy has shifted towards services, our state's tax system is built around goods. Demographics are another challenge. As Boulder's population ages, households buy fewer taxable items. And in 2026, more shopping happens online, where cities receive only a portion of the tax. We've renewed important taxes, started taxing online purchases, and improved auditing, but the basic trend the BRC identified, reduced spending on goods and more on services, means most city revenues grow more slowly than the economy, even in good years. Next time, we'll look at why the cost of providing city services rises faster than household inflation and how that adds to our budget gap. Last time, we looked at why our sales taxes don't align with how people spend money today. The BRC highlighted another reason for our budget gap. The inflation cities face rises faster than household inflation. Cities buy goods tied to global markets like asphalt, concrete, and energy, and specialized labor. These costs rise faster than the consumer price index. For example, Boulder maintains hundreds of miles of streets and paths. Because the cost of asphalt is tied to global oil markets, when those prices spike, the number of miles we can repave each year drops, even if our budget stays the same. Over the past 2 decades, Boulder has modernized its asset management and improved financial policies. But because of the nature of the things the city spends its money on, the cost of maintaining the same level of service will continue to rise faster than our revenues, especially while we're relying so heavily on sales tax. Next time, we'll start connecting these trends to the bigger picture the BRC created. Last time, we talked about why the cost of providing the same services in a city rises faster than household inflation. One of the many useful things the BRC did was to look holistically at the basic services people rely on. No one had done this before, so we didn't understand the nature of our challenges until they put police, fire, parks, human services, and transportation costs together in a single theoretical bucket they called the Expanded General Fund. The structural gap in Boulder's budget didn't show up clearly looking at only one department or even one fund. Our budget is unusually fragmented because of decades of earmarking and dedicated taxes. That means the true cost of basic services is scattered across multiple funds, and the true revenue picture is scattered too. By pulling everything into one place, the BRC showed that the long-term gap was a structural problem and that it couldn't be solved by looking at any single department or fund in isolation. They gave us a clearer picture of the whole system rather than the individual pieces. Next time, we'll look at why cutting programs won't fix a structural problem. Last time we looked at how the BRC showed the full cost of basic services across the whole system. A common reaction to long-term budget pressure is just cut something. The BRC addressed this directly, and it's worth a reminder. Most of the city's costs are tied to people, facilities, equipment, and long-term commitments. Those costs don't disappear cleanly when a program goes away. If you eliminate one program, many of the underlying costs remain. For example, if you cut a recreation program, you still have to pay for the building, the HVAC system, the insurance, and other fixed costs. And if you cut too deeply, you lose the capacity you need to deliver core services later. Rebuilding capacity often costs more than maintaining it. The BRC made the important point that we can't cut our way out of a structural problem. Cuts can help in a single year, but they don't change the long-term math when we're facing underlying trends like slower revenue growth, higher cost growth, and a shifting tax base. Next time, we'll start talking about the statewide rules every city in Colorado has to operate under.